What's up guys, welcome back to the Need to Know channel. If you're new, please like the video and hit the bell notifications so you never miss a new video upload in the future. On to today's subject, boxing. I'm going to tell you all why I think boxing is the #1 best martial art for a beginner who one day hopes to really excel in any other martial art of their choosing and really get the best out of their fighting abilities. So what does boxing give you fundamentally? It gives you toughness and conditioning. It gives you good jab and footwork. It gives you good head movement and all more. And I'll explain all these different aspects which boxing gives you, which will give you a leg up in other martial arts. So as we go along, I'll give you reasons as to why these aspects are so important. So let's move on. All these different aspects can be picked up in boxing, whereas in other martial arts are either lacking these, or even if they have some of these, they can overall take a long time to develop within a person, generally speaking. Whereas boxing can help you develop these a lot faster. Now onto the first reason on the list, which is effective jab and footwork. You can always tell the difference between a fighter who has mastered this and a fighter that is not. And here, this is where I want to tell you about something that happened to me recently in the karate dojo that I train in. So I was sparring with this guy, right, who is roughly around the same level of expertise in martial arts as me. But what he told me is that years prior to training in a karate, he had been training in boxing for years. So his #1 tactic in sparring would just be to wait for his opponent to chuck a kick out there, avoid the kick, and then he would quickly lean in with his footwork and jab and land a hard jab or two on his opponent. And then once he's in that close range, he would just keep on chucking punches at him. Which makes sense for him to do that from his point of view as a boxer, because in that close quarters he's always going to be effective with those hands. And every single time that I would try to land a kick on him, he would just move out of range so fast, and then in a moment's notice he would move back in range and keep hitting me with his jab. And that's why the jab and footwork is so important and essential for a fighter to master. And because boxing is a striking art with no kicks in it, it makes up for with its perfect footwork. Now onto the next point, bobbing and weaving. Boxing teaches you the best bobbing and weaving head movement out of any other martial art that you can learn, because in other arts that involve kicking and other moves, we'll mainly prioritize blocking and counterattacks as opposed to bobbing, weaving and ducking. Because in martial arts that involve kicking, if you bob and weave and duck your head like this, you run yourself at risk to being kicked or kneed in the face. But because in boxing, because there is no kicking involved in the art, learning a bit of head movement is highly practical if you're going up against someone who's just trying to punch you. Now onto blocking technique. Boxing teaches you the best type of blocking technique than any other martial art out there when it comes to a full-on brawl. Now I'm not talking about other kinds of blocking techniques that you would learn in other martial arts, which would probably tailor better towards more of a self-defense or ambush type of encounter. But I'm just talking about the kind of blocking that when you're moving around like this, you know, you're like in more of a fighting session, right? I'm not referring to the kind of blocking which would tailor more to a self-defense encounter where someone's trying to hit you with a bat or come around a corner and ambush you at any given moment. Because self-defense is a different fighting context in itself, and those kinds of blocking moves would work great for that. But I'm just saying that this would be more effective in a fight. So as far as being in a brawl goes, this is where that boxing practicality comes in hand with that practical blocking, which would help you very much in a fight. Now onto punching technique. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut and overhand are the only offensive moves taught in boxing. And a person that has devoted a long time to just training in those basic 5 techniques, in comparison to someone who has been training a long time in another martial art, learning 50, 100 or up to 2,000 different techniques, that person who had just been training in those 5 basic punches will actually be more well versed in a fight because there's not much fighting technique that you have to go over and just remember. So let's say for example you have 2 people, right? One has been training in boxing, the other training in any other martial art for the same amount of time. The person spent practicing those basic 5 punches for the same amount of time as this other person over here who has been learning a whole bunch of different overly complicated moves that are hard to remember and drill in. The boxer will be more well versed in a fight, in that a situation if those two met in a self-defense encounter. And that is if these two were training for the same amount of time, that is. Now don't get me wrong, these other types of martial arts moves over here can be very deadly, But then again, the boxer would just be able to pick up all of his moves in a much shorter amount of time, and therefore be more well-versed and confident in a shorter amount of time for when the day comes where he finds himself in a real-world encounter. Now, if you aspire to train in any other martial art, or you're already good at another martial art, that's amazing, because here on this channel, that's what I highly encourage, to try out different martial arts and see what works for you. But then again, if you haven't considered boxing, after watching this video would be a good reason to. Now on to the next key point, sparring. Boxers spend more time doing this. Unlike in other martial arts, boxers do not spend a huge amount of time focusing on things like kata or any other kind of complex, overly esoteric fighting moves, for most of which you would never end up using in a real encounter anyway. Because boxers spend a lot more time competing, just like Muay Thai and other kickboxers. But here's sort of a downside to kickboxing and Muay Thai. The downside is that in those arts you don't really move off the center line of your opponent, which is understandable given their art, because in kicking arts, if you move off the center line, you leave yourself open to a kick, generally speaking. And in boxing, because there's only punching involved, there is less of a risk of getting hurt, so you can train more frequently without having to worry about taking too much long-term damage, unlike in other kicking arts like Muay Thai, kickboxing, and also Kyokushin karate. So before we wrap up this video, there's just one key point that I would like to make. That is that learning boxing at an MMA gym is not a smart idea at all. Because at an MMA gym, you're learning a wide variety of different techniques from various kinds of fighting arts. And for what MMA makes up for in quantity of techniques you learn, it lacks in basic boxing techniques, for the most part. Because in most MMA gyms, their main focus is jiu-jitsu. Now there are some exceptional MMA gyms out there that do focus more on boxing, but that is far less common. So I would not try to learn boxing at your typical MMA gym. So thank you all so much for watching. Now remember, at the end of the day, I'm not saying that boxing is the best martial art, but if you want to get the best out of your striking abilities, do boxing before crossing over to another art like a karate or Muay Thai or whatever, MMA, because that will give you the building blocks for good punching and good defensive moves. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm signing off.